nerds, welcome back to the podcast. Today my guest is Max Spyro, and we're going to be talking about...
old superheroes. I guess I started with superhero comics. My dad grew up collecting them, and we just had Anthem, so I would read them after school all the time. Definitely got into that nerdy phase. So we're just going to talk about old superheroes, new superheroes, everything in between.
We're going to compare some of the old versions to new versions, especially in film adaptations that are coming up, and we'll just see where it takes us.
Sweet. So first of all, we were just talking about this. I was reading all the old Spider-Mans, which I haven't read in forever. And one thing that I really missed initially was kind of that quippy superhero-ness. Like, the off-the-cuff banter that is completely impossible if you're in a really high adrenaline situation. So, like, you're fighting Doc Ock, it's going great, but you still manage to, like, throw in a one-liner. Like, that to me has always been impressive. Hence why I'm really excited for Deadpool. Because that is getting brought back. That kind of quippy, off-the-cuff, ridiculous banter is back in superhero movies. Which, like, I think Tony Stark in the new Iron Man did a little bit better. Robert Downey Jr. did an excellent job. But still, like, having that to the next nth degree, very impressed by it.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. Spider-Man, the original Spider-Man, which I also grew up reading. That was how I got my start in comic books, was with Spider-Man. And he was just so witty and so entertaining. And I think that was why, as a kid, I really loved him, because I loved this idea of, being the nerdy kid at school and then being the super sassy guy when he's fighting crime. And we didn't really get that in the most recent Spider-Man movies, either of the adaptations, the Andrew Garfield or the Tobey Maguire. And so we got it a little more with Andrew Garfield, but it still felt kind of like he was talking down to supervillains as opposed to like talking up at them as being the little guy who makes the fun comments.
On top of that, though, like, when I was rereading these, so it's like early 60s, right? I think Amazing Fantasy 15 came out like 61, 62, right around then. So like Peter Parker is the epitome of just nerd back then. Yeah. And I would love to see like a re-adaptation of that for like what a true nerd would look like in now 2016. Like would Spider-Man, like Peter Parker, have a rat tail? Like would he bring around a rolly backpack? Like these are the things that I want to see in a new adaptation because that's what he was. He's this egghead nerd, like Flash Thompson just made fun of him all the time. Like, I would love to see that. I think the Andrew Garfield, they got the body type of Spider-Man a little bit better, but like moving forward, finding that like true, like skinny, kind of nerdy, awkward dude. If he had acne, it'd be even better. Like that, Spider-Man was awkward. Like I think that's something that we just never quite got, especially with the Tobey Maguire. Like I think the first two Spider-Man movies with Tobey Maguire were not bad. Like, I think, honestly, they did a pretty good job. I like the adaptations they made, like, bringing in Doc Ock, that was pretty impressive. They did a good job with the Green Goblin. Spider-Man 3, like, another story. But still.
We won't talk about that.
We won't talk about that one. But, like, seeing that new Peter Parker, like, a truly new Peter Parker, as a 17-year-old super awkward kid with a rat tail, is something that I would love to see Marvel take on.
Yeah, especially because Peter Parker was a nerd when that came out. And being a nerd wasn't cool. Like, now nerdiness is kind of chic. And we have geek chic, we have nerdiness in the mainstream culture. People love being a nerd now, and it's a great time to be alive if you are a nerd. I'm glad we're not in the 60s.
True.
Yeah, and so I would love to see him be dorky, because it's still not cool to be a dork. Like, and that's what Peter Parker is. He's a dork.
Yeah, that's fair. So are you saying like Peter Parker should come in with like sweatpants raised up like above the belly button
absolutely.
And like tucked in socks? So that's the Peter Parker we're looking for.
Yeah, we're looking for the Peter Parker that is a social pariah because he is so weird. And then it makes it more of an impact when he's all of a sudden this superhero and he gets these powers and he gets to feel cool. That is all the difference.
I can definitely see that. I mean, I think Peter Parker was also, I think, really the only one who's like the true nerd. Like, Stan Lee loved the bully story.
Yeah.
Like, I was reading all over, like, Matt Murdock bullied as a kid.
Yep.
Like, Doc Ock, like, beaten by his father. Like, Peter Parker bullied as a child. Like, he really, like, there's some serious subconscious stuff going on there. Like,
yeah.
And, like, but seeing that a little bit more in a modern lens, I think would be really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Get some cyberbullying in there. Just update it for 2016. Go the full millennial route. Absolutely.
Just like throwing the entire soundtrack of the movie as My Chemical Romance. Good shot. Like, I like that 2003 angst back. It's great. Absolutely. It'd be a fantastic film.
Yeah. So, Stanley, take note. So, like you said, we're super excited for the Deadpool movie. You should be too. It's coming out very, very soon. And one of the great things about Deadpool is that he was made to be a parody. He was made to be a parody of Deathstroke from the DC universe. And so that was a very serious villain, very evil, and really, really, really well done in the DC universe. And then to just take that and flip it all the way around and have this villain who was sort of an anti-hero at the same time, that's something else we're excited for. Because we saw a lot of that in a lot of the Deathstroke type characters in the old comics, villains who were really evil and not ambiguous. And then in some of our newer comic adaptations, we have villains who could be good, could be evil, depending on how you look at it. Like in the new Daredevil series on Netflix, their portrayal of Wilson Fisk is very ambiguous, and it's hard to tell sometimes whether Fisk or Murdoch is right.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree, and there's also something that's like really catchy about having the true dichotomy between good and evil.
Yeah.
And having it be even like that much over the top. Like the Red Skull. Like there's nothing good about that guy. There's literally nothing good. You're so much identifying with Captain America. It's not even a question. But like I guess yes it's more nuanced, yes it's probably more real. But like it was still for like true trashy, like I'm just gonna like turn my mind off and read a comic book, like going back to like a bygone era, like with the Red Scare, like literally propaganda was awesome.
And one of the great things, like even when they did a DC Marvel crossover and they had Joker in the Captain America universe, and he was working with Red Skull, but when he found out that Red Skull was a Nazi, Joker was like, I may be a villain, but I'm an American villain. And so, just like that over-the-top evilness, I think we've really lost in modern comic books.
I think so too. I guess, like, coming back to Deadpool though, like that, I think he's gonna do a really good job of that, because it's not like a pure, completely, like, God, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, he's not the best guy. Like, he's not in it for the complete, like, greatest reasons ever. You know, he's not there for the sake of being good. Like, he's not taking all this punishment upon himself. He's taking it for vengeance. Because he is really, really pissed off. And, like, because of that huge fan, like, not everyone is that good. Like, I highly doubt a 17-year-old Peter Parker right now would, like, take on the mantle of being Spider-Man for all of New York City. Like, that's just not a thing. Whereas, like, Deadpool, if you're that pissed off at someone, and if your face looks like an avocado that had sex with an older avocado like that, yeah, I'd be pretty pissed off too.
Yeah, and also vengeance storylines were huge back in the 60s.
Yeah. I mean, when, like, going back to Spider-Man, like, the entire Aunt May Doc Ock marriage thing where Peter is just, like, so mad. Just Spider-Man just hates Doc Ock, but he can't do anything because he's marrying his aunt, but really using it as, like, a tool to get back at Spider-Man. I don't feel like heroes did it as much, though, in the 60s. Like, vengeance wasn't as much a part of there.
Oh, vengeance was a villain.
It was very much a villain thing. It was like, you wronged me, so I'm going to get back at you. And, like, I'm going to cut you to the core by marrying your aunt.
Yeah, or I will get back at you, but it will be tenfold what you did to me. Like, you may have bullied me as a child, but I will destroy your entire life and take away every single thing that you ever loved as an adult.
Like, that was pretty transcendent, too, across the Marvel and the DC universes.
Absolutely.
Like, that, I feel like that's just a tenet of, like, the 1960s and 70s villain, which, like, is something that I'm glad that is kind of crossing over a little bit more to the good guy side now. It's funny. It's just, like, it's that over the top that makes comics what they are.
Absolutely. And one of the key differences, I think, early in DC Marvel was that Marvel really tried to address issues of the time by taking them on head on, because, you know, Peter Parker was in New York City, and if there was an issue in New York City, we could address it through Peter Parker directly in New York City. Whereas DC tended to address things more through allegory, and they would take on issues just by having examples of those issues within the comics. And so I think we've lost a lot of that in modern comics. So we're more focused on the heroes, and we have these bombastic storylines, but we're sort of, I think, missing a lot of the original allegory in the DC universe and the head-on tackling in the Marvel universe. And I think the only thing I can think of off the top of my head is Captain America Civil War, which deals with, like, information privacy, but I think we've kind of lost that too. Like, Captain America, when segregation was a huge issue, he brought in Freedom Force, and they fought together with Freedom Force, and I think that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, it's especially kind of in the modern film adaptations, you see that a little bit. Kind of, they use the same sort of topical issues, like Tony Stark getting kidnapped in Afghanistan, like that. They still bring it in to make it relevant, but it's not the same sort of social justice. I mean, I don't want to call it that because I don't think it's quite on that same level, but there is definitely a progressive nature to comic books in the early 60s. I mean, if you look at, and then in the 70s too, like, you'd have Spider-Man team up with Black Panther, and like all of these other kind of crossing between lines, but I guess they're doing that now as well. I mean, there's the new Muslim,
Kamala Khan,
there we go.
As Miss Marvel.
Miss Marvel's like that. I think it's progressive, and in a similar way, but not, it's not quite as, I guess it was a little bit more, like, allegorical, like you were saying. It wasn't quite as in your face.
And especially with, like, the X-Men, really liked a lot of those early storylines. Just dealing with xenophobia in the most extreme way possible by dealing with mutants.
Yeah, I actually hadn't thought of it that way, but, like, actually, one of my favorite storylines from X-Men was the Beast storyline. Like, you have, like, kind of the self-loathing mutant of being that outsider, but still representing other people, and Beast eventually just says, I'm not cut out for this, I want to try to get this gene transformation that'll turn me into a human. Like, yes, I'll still have, like, size 25 feet and, like, crazy hands, but I'll be normal, and that ends up turning him into the blue, hairy beast that he became, I think, in, like, the early 70s on. Like that, I just thought that was a really interesting take on it. You don't necessarily see all of that self-loathing with the xenophobia, trying to assimilate, trying to get back into mainstream culture, and then being literally rejected by your body and becoming more powerful, more of an outcast.
Yeah. And that outcast storyline is one of the best storylines that happens in any comic book for me. That's why I think people are driven to be the superheroes and the supervillains that they are, is because of this feeling of being an outsider. And I really like that in Teen Titans, the new Teen Titans, because it was perfect because they're teenagers and you felt that teen angst, but they just had a bigger stage to do it on.
Yeah, absolutely. With the new Teen Titans, I thought also hilarious. I mean, one of the major issues I've had between the DC and the Marvel universe is that DC was always over the top. Like, you always read, like, the Legion of Superheroes who are supposed to be 15 and they're calling each other darling, and it's just like, no. Like, it was not applicable at all. However, when you're getting into that real teen angst later on, it's like a little bit more sophisticated teen angst, the new Teen Titans. It's hilarious. Like, you just see the whole Raven manipulation, you see all of, like, this really great, I guess I wouldn't say character development, but more just like angst. It was just there, it was present, it was like very much felt through the comic, through these outsiders. I mean, that being said, they still had fun with it. It never felt, there are a lot of superheroes that I felt kind of applied that angsty role. So like early Spider-Man, he's a total nerd, reject, outcast. I always felt like the Teen Titans, or at least the new Teen Titans, felt a lot more comfortable with who they were. Like, they were having fun with it as opposed to like having this complete alter ego where you can like be bullied on, like, and then you have to keep it in and then you release it as part of your superhero persona. Yeah,
because the new Teen Titans, their angst was always within their group.
Yeah.
And so their problems were relational at their very core. And speaking of great quippy characters, Beast Boy was really well done. And he didn't really have that much angst. He just happened to be really sassy, and we got to experience that as comic book readers.
Yeah, that sass is just unparalleled. I mean, I don't think that I've ever read a comic where the superhero is having more fun than Beast Boy. I mean, the guy is constantly changing into weird animals to make fun of the other new Teen Titans. Like, you'll see in like that giant pool that he has, because he's a mega majilia billionaire, like he'll just be like hanging out as a dolphin underneath there. Just, he feels like he's always trying to be like, make someone else kind of the brunt of his jokes, which is just a great team dynamic, especially when you have Robin there, who's serious and like tutelage of Batman, who's like maybe a borderline sociopath. Like, we could get into that later, but like, you just have this it's just a very, like, it's a great foil for Robin, which I thought was a good part of that ensemble.
And this new Teen Titans stuff, this was happening in the 80s. And so I think that this is, you know, it was a good reflection of its time. All of a sudden you got a little bit of punk rock, you got a little more angst, and you brought that into the comic books.
Absolutely. And you also have Starfire, who's just like a crazy alien with no boundaries whatsoever.
Yeah, no recognition of human culture,
None
no
at
attempts
all,
to adapt.
Which is it's just hilarious. So I think that they played off that dynamic really well, where you have all of these really different people, like very different personalities represented across the entire group, and kind of bringing that into the fold.
Yeah, and I think I've always liked New Teen Titans better than Justice League, because Justice League also had a lot of personalities, but there's a lot of pride involved in Justice League. And so there were a lot of big personalities, and they just oftentimes didn't get along. And when they came together, it was great, and it was perfect for the storyline. But they were very serious about what they were doing. Whereas New Teen Titans, they were teens, and they were having a fun time.
I'll tell you, I think there's also something really great about having it all be sidekicks. Like, you know, you have all of these, if you think about it, like, in equivalent to like a sports reference, like you have all these superstars in the Justice League, right? And like everyone's gonna have their own agenda. It's like putting all these like crazy best basketball players in the world on the same team together. Like they may not gel perfectly because one person will be like, no, Batman's gonna say like, no, I'm the best, and Superman, who's obviously like a freak, is yes, like I'm the best. And like it's just a pride thing. Whereas when you have sidekicks, like there's that little bit of humility with them. Like they I think they interact a lot better because they don't necessarily need to be the top dog in every. You know, they don't have their own comic line for each of them. That was reflected.
Yeah, exactly. There's no catchphrase. There's just a true, in the moment love of what they're doing.
That's true. I mean, that was like about the end of like my true comic following was like those 80s. That's kind of when my dad's anthems ended. So, well then he kind of moved over towards more of the independent stuff. So like I got into that a little bit more. So like Cerebus the Aardvark and the Badger. So like
Badger goes berserk.
Oh, Badger! It's amazing. But like, I wish I had more time, kind of seeing how DC and Marvel really adapted through the 80s and 90s. It wasn't. I kind of have that early stuff, but seeing how it maybe got even more nuanced in the 90s would have been something that when I have free time, I'll go back and do.
Yeah, the 90s were a great time for comic books as well. I think it's often glossed over in terms of comic book history because, to be honest, not a lot that was super influential in the comic book world really happened, but it was a great time for comic book outfits, let me tell you that.
Okay, so what is your favorite comic book outfit in the 90s?
Okay, well, I have spoken about Typhoid Mary before on the vlog, and she was updated in the later Daredevil series, and she got her own series with Ann Nocenti doing it, so a side spin-off series with the adult Marvel comics. But in the 90s, her outfit was one leg of fishnets, one leg of jeans, high-heeled boots, shoulder pads, football shoulder pads, pink crop top, and red super permed hair with bangs. So that's probably one of my favorites. And she doesn't stand alone there. Like, Wonder Woman got really good, Batman took on some new bells and whistles. He, I think it was late 80s, early 90s that he adopted like a robot suit. So really, really prime stuff that as a child of the 90s, I think I have a greater appreciation for. I think if you were to just go back and read them, they're probably not as good as the stuff that came out of like the 60s and the 80s.
I wouldn't say like dead years, but
but maybe dead years.
But maybe dead years.
Yeah, so that pretty much covers it, I think, for what we had to talk about for early comic books. If you join us another time, we will definitely tackle some of the newer comic book themes, and especially more in the film adaptations. So thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch you next time.
Sounds good. Thanks, everyone.